It got rained out again today. I was out there a little while, but didn't help much. You know, I wonder if that.
Don't worry, I know what will kill him. Going ghost. I got one more in me. How much that's on top?
You know, here's a little something about my family. I'm going all the way back to 1950. I thought we were a normal family, and I never knew anything different than my mom and dad and my other three brothers and my sister. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked at one of the shipyards in Newport News. He worked there during the war too, building ships, Liberty ships. But he was an alcoholic. I can't ever remember a time back then when he was sober. He was always drunk. I don't know if he went to work drunk or not. But in Mother's Day, 1951 is when my mom and my dad split up. He come home drunk one night. I don't know what day of the week it is. I guess I could look it up. Matter of fact, let me do that right quick. Let me do that right quick. I'm gonna see what. I'm betting it was probably a Friday. We'll see. Alright, I just looked that up. Mother's Day 1951 was on a Sunday. So now that I remembered everything a little bit better, my daddy didn't go to work drinking. He would have got fired. But his routine was on Friday they got paid. He cashed his check. And he started going to bars. This didn't happen every weekend, but most weekends it did. He'd go to a bar, he'd get drunk, and he'd stay drunk the whole weekend. And that's when he was home Sunday night, drunk. Him and Mama got in a fight over something. And he was throwing dishes and stuff and breaking them. And he passed out right there in the living room floor. I'm having trouble talking. I got my teeth in. I'm slurring my speech more with them in. I don't know why I got them in. But he passed out. Mom went and got a pillow and put under his head. I remember that. And then she left. We were there by ourselves. And directly she come back with Bob Folks, Robert William Folks Jr. That was her boyfriend. She had been having an affair with him. I didn't know this till later. She packed her some stuff, and she packed some of us kids' clothes in some little brown paper bags. We didn't know what was going on. But we got in Bob Folks' car, and his car was a 1948 blue Buick sedan. And we took off to North Carolina. We was living in Norfolk, Virginia, 1331 North Woodlawn Avenue. And when we got to North Carolina, she went to Roanoke Rapids to her mama and daddy's. They lived on Jefferson Street. And she was trying to get her mama and daddy to take me, Carolyn, and George. We were the oldest of the five. To take and keep us till she'd come back and get us. And her mama raked her over the coals about it, and I mean, just tore her a new one. And if you're leaving your husband, you take his with you. We're not taking care of them. So she loaded us back up in the car, and across town we went to my grandmother Pearson, my daddy's mama. She lived kind of out in the country. And she didn't go in there and ask Grandma to take us. What she did, she told us to go knock on the front door. And quick as the door opened, and that's what we did. Quick as the door opened, of course she told us, she said she would see us. That's very difficult to talk with my teeth. She said she'd see us in a few days. Well, that was a lie. We didn't see her again for 3 years. But quick as that door opened, her and Bob took off spinning wheels, leaving the driveway. And we didn't know what was going on. We didn't understand. I was 10. Carolyn was 9. George was 7. So, and back in them days, my mom and daddy was the first ones in the family to get a divorce. And divorce back then in our families and everything, that was a big no-no. Now you didn't do that. What? You know it? No way, no how. And so right then, me and Carolyn and George was the black sheep of the family. I always remembered overhearing some of the families saying, "What about Russell's kids? Who's going to take care of his kids?" And some of them out here say, "Well, I can't do it," you know. And they didn't know where Daddy was at. Well, Daddy came from Virginia to North Carolina, and he took me and Carolyn back to Virginia with him. Boy, that was what a mess that was. And he didn't stop drinking.
Let's just go.
I remember one time when he took us back, he went out drinking, left me and Carolyn there by ourselves.
We'll go the other way.
Well, before he left, he'd been sitting there on the sofa, and he must have dropped a cigarette butt or something that was lit on the sofa. And it didn't make an open flame, it just was sitting there just smoking, smoke coming out of the house. People called the fire department. Well, we was there by ourselves, and they took me and Carolyn away from there and took us to I don't know if you call it a foster home or what, but we went to somebody's house. And it was a while, I guess, before Daddy got us back. My mind, my mind is not too clear. My mind was not too clear about all that right then. And he wound up taking us back to Roanoke Rapids. The law enforcement didn't want him taking care of us. And we went, and I think Carolyn, George was at Rosa Mays. He'd already been at Rosa Mays. And he worked hard on that farm. And when we went back to North Carolina, they took Carolyn to Aunt Ann's and Uncle Kenneth's. And now wait a minute, I went to Aunt Ann's and Uncle Kenneth's. Carolyn, I'm not sure which aunt and uncle she went with. But I was with Aunt Ann's and Uncle Kenneth's, and they were farmers. And worked my butt off. Of course, they was taking care of me, and they'd feed me, roof over my head. But we were the black sheep. Now, the only aunt and uncle that really wanted me was my Aunt Mamie and Uncle Jack. They were the only ones that wanted me. And he was like a part-time farmer. And Aunt Mamie worked at the cotton mill. Uncle Jack, he raised corn, peanuts, and cotton. Not a huge acreage. But I didn't mind that because that was Frankie's mom and daddy, and Frankie was my absolute favorite cousin, my favorite person in the whole world. He had some good times there. But I wasn't a really bad kid, but I was always mischievous as all get out, and always getting into some kind of trouble or something, just minor stuff. And I think at that point, Uncle Jack decided they didn't want me, but Aunt Mamie did. Then they decided they was going to try to adopt me. But they had to get Mama's permission too, and my dad's, to do that. But they couldn't get Mama's permission because they didn't know where she was at. But when she finally did come on the scene, again, a couple of years later, they asked her about it, and she wouldn't sign for it. She wouldn't sign release for me to be adopted. At that time, I couldn't understand why. But later on, many years later, I found out why. Mama was having an affair with Uncle Jack, Aunt Mamie's husband, Frankie's daddy. She was having an affair with him, and at one point, and it's widely believed that Uncle Jack is my brother George's daddy, which will make George my half-brother. Me and George made cracks about it all over the years, but don't know that for that. Me and George was talking about one time doing DNAs to see if we was half-brothers or full brothers. But that's why Mama didn't want Aunt Mamie to have me, because they had this problem way back when. Mama was up at Uncle Jack's, and here come Aunt Mamie. They lived across the field. Here come Aunt Mamie, and she was probably just fuming. She had found a letter or a note or something from my mama to Uncle Jack. She had found that. And straight from the horse's mouth, she walked into Grandma's back door of the kitchen. Mama was standing there, and she cold-cocked. She cold-cocked my mama, knocked her plumb out the door, knocked her out. And Grandma said, "Why did you do that?" And Aunt Mamie told her. And oh man, I wish I could have seen that. Seen her knocking my mama out the door. The door, there was a screen door. The door wasn't closed, but the screen door was there. Hit her so hard, knocked her plumb out that door and down that step into the yard, in the dirt. Maybe I shouldn't laugh like that, but that was funny. That was funny. I guess it was. But that's why why she would never sign for Aunt Mamie to adopt me. And I've always called Aunt Mamie my second mom. And Aunt Mamie, she just died about 3 or 4 years ago. She was 100 and something. Sweetest woman in the world. Took care of me. I had asthma. I didn't know you could have asthma and then it go away, but I had asthma back then. And I had to have my head laying a certain way in the bed at night. And when I was at Aunt Mamie's, she's come in there and tucked me in and everything and say prayers with me and everything, you know. What was that? And she'd say a prayer, and then she'd have me say a prayer. And the prayer I said was, how was that? Now I lay me down to sleep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I think that's the way it went. But my family was very religious. Now, when I say my family, I'm not talking about my mama and daddy. And now, Daddy used to, when we sat down to the dinner table, Daddy used to make us bow our heads and he'd say a blessing, you know. And we'd all sit down there and he'd say, stick. That means stick your head down. And he'd say a blessing. But bless his heart, he was hooked on that booze. He was hooked on that booze. But we was the black sheep, you know. People always talking about poor Russell's kids and stuff like that, and we was always getting clothing gifts and stuff from the aunts and uncles and stuff, and but that made us the black sheep. We was the black sheep. And I think some of the cousins, the kids, I think they felt kind of, I think they kind of looked down on us. Because we didn't have the family life that they had. All my other cousins and my aunts and uncles, well, no, I had one, Uncle Aubrey. He was he was an alcoholic. And actually, I'll tell you this, he worked at the White House. And I'll elaborate on the story later on about that, but he worked at the White House. And back when Truman, Harry Truman was president. But he was an alcoholic. And it must have been contagious because his wife, and we call her Aunt Mammy Aubrey, and we call Aunt Mammy Jack, Frankie's mother. But there was 10 kids in that family. See if I can remember them all. There was Aunt Dora, Uncle Aubrey, Rosa May, Aunt Ruby, Uncle Jack, Uncle JB. JB was a veteran in World War II. And he was the youngest one. And what was the others? Rosa May, Aunt Dorothy. Aunt Dorothy is still living. She's around 101, 102. But they're just about all gone now. You know, I'll stick a picture of my family, that whole family. It was at a family reunion in 1944. But we were the black sheep, and I've always felt like the black sheep. Even today, I feel like the black sheep. Because all of my other cousins, they were educated. Well, Aunt Dora, she went to college, but she was a housewife, because her husband, Uncle Glenn, he was a Methodist minister. Aunt Mammy Aubrey, which is Uncle Aubrey's wife, she was a housewife. Rosa May was a farm. Her and her husband had a big farm. When I say big farm, I'm talking about hundreds of acres. And Uncle JB was a World War II vet. I'm missing somebody. I can't remember them all. I mean, I was close with all of them, and I stayed with all of them. Aunt Bertha Lewis, her husband was a farmer, and he had hundreds of acres under cultivation. I always liked to go to the farm during the summer. I always liked to go. I didn't mind the work. I mean, I didn't particularly like it, but you know, it's just what you did. And I got some of the greatest memories of being on Aunt Rosa May's farm. And Aunt Rosa May and her husband, Uncle Maynard, she lived in her aunt mother-in-law's house, Miss Gupton, which it wasn't a problem. But I remember in the morning, I always woke up, if I start smelling food and it's smelling good, I'll wake up. And Miss Gupton always she cooked on a wood stove in there, and she had a fireplace. And she had a pot of something hanging in that fireplace cooking. And some of the best sausage and stuff you ever had. Everything was fresh. You didn't go to the store to get your eggs. You went up there in the chicken pen and got your eggs. You didn't go to the store to get your butter. Miss Gupton would sit there at the end of the day with the churn, sitting there churning buttermilk, making butter. There was ham, smoked ham and stuff hanging in the smokehouse outside. You went out there to get your meat. They had beef too, you know, but they had to keep it in the freezer. And back then, you didn't have a freezer at home. You have to go to town. There'd be a freezer locker down there, and you paid so much rent a month for that locker. And they would, when you butchered a cow, they would dress it out and everything, and wrap it and freeze it and mark it. And when you wanted something, you just come in there and got it. Rosa May, she used to, on every Saturday, she would take fresh eggs, fresh homemade butter, and buttermilk to a grocery store in town and sell them that stuff. She would trade it to them for stuff like flour and, you know, staple shelf goods and everything. But let me take a little sip of coffee.
I don't know how
But that's some of the fonder memories I have. I don't have an education. I'll tell you what, if I would have had an education, things would have been a lot different for me and my wife and my kids. Back when I was a kid going to school, nobody encouraged me to go to school. Nobody taught me the importance of having an education, instilling into me things that I needed brought into me, you know, my life. I never had that. I remember when I told Daddy I wanted to quit school when I turned 16, and he said, well, if you quit school, you're going to go to work. Or when he found out I was starting smoking, well, you ain't going to do that. No, he didn't tell me that. He said, you're going to buy them. He said, I thought my cigarettes was disappearing. I almost become a drinker with his liquor. Almost. I learned when I was 16. Nobody ever encouraged me about education. That was just, and that was the only, all my other cousins, the only cousins in that family, counting myself, that didn't do okay or didn't get an education was the children of the alcoholics. The alcoholics being Uncle Aubrey and my daddy, and Uncle Jack occasionally. Uncle Aubrey's kids, well, I can't say, I don't know why, but one of Uncle Aubrey's kids was named AC. And at one point in time, do y'all remember the Western Auto stores? He lived in Maryland and he owned the franchise for every Western Auto store in the state of Maryland. But that was the only child of his, and he had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He had 7. AC did okay, but the rest didn't. Especially the twins. Y'all have heard me talk about my twin cousins. They didn't do well. They started drinking. I just kind of forgot that they were kind of black sheeps too in the family. But Ray, the twins, Diane and Shirley Ann, and their brother Ray, they were favorites of mine too. They're all dead now. That whole family's dead. All the brothers and sisters in that family are dead. But yeah, I always looked at me as a black sheep of the family. And I don't know how my sister felt about that last night, but I don't know, my sisters, at least I got 3 sisters, Carolyn, Donna, and Carol. The Carol is the one that was put up for adoption in 1963. And by her being put up for adoption like that, she lucked out. She got out of this family. She lucked out. But she did get to go see Mama just a few days before Mama died. She never got to talk to her. She wanted to talk to her. But anyhow, that's kind of the way I was raised and everything. But I only speak for me. I can't speak for Carolyn. I can't speak. George thinks pretty much like I do. But Carolyn doesn't. Carolyn doesn't. But I just speak for myself. So, folks, I'm the black sheep of the family. I guess. That's my story, folks, and I'm sticking to it. See ya in the next one.